It's July 19th. Ukraine Media Center Ukrinform continues its operation. My name is Svetlana. Now we will be talking about the fire and mine safety in Ukraine. Our guests today are Oleksandr Khorunzhy, the press officer of the State Emergency Service of Ukraine, and Rudak, Deputy Director of the Department for Emergency Prevention at the State Emergency Service of Ukraine. So, Mr. Oleksandr, can you please share the information about current situation? Glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes. Well, we had a difficult night. Our rescuers and all of our Ukrainians, the southern regions were affected by a terroristic attack by Russian Federation. Mostly the strikes were concentrated on Odessa region, and our rescuers were working there all night long for mitigation of consequences of shellings and missile strikes. We involved 140 personnel and 36 unit vehicles. During those attacks, according to the preliminary information, which is still being double-checked, 4 civilians were injured, specifically those who were staying in apartment blocks. I just want to focus on a number of facilities where we were mitigating the consequences of shelling and putting out the fire. During the second night, there was a missile strike. The missile hit one of the markets, which resulted in fire catching on the territory of 2,000 square meters, 7 administrative facilities. The fire that erupted there was put out only by the morning because the fire was burning on the area of 2,000 square meters. It was put out at 8:25. Another missile strike hit a storage facility where the tobacco products were stored. The fire erupted on the area of 1,000 square meters. 5 vehicles and 14 rescuers were engaged in putting out the fire. At 8:30, the fire was put out. I want to remind you that upon those 3 strikes, the apartment blocks were damaged by the debris of the missiles and unmanned aerial vehicles, and in those apartment blocks we had 5 people injured that I've mentioned. I also want to focus on Mykolaiv region. As a result of enemy's attack on the Koblevo community, where the facilities of recreational infrastructure destroyed, the teams on duty set off for a mission in Koblevo district, in Koblevo community. The fire was being put out even during another wave, a repeated wave of the enemy's attack. The shockwave damaged a number of administrative facilities plus 1 air defense vehicle. 1 serviceman was hospitalized. That's in brief about the consequences of the latest enemy attacks on the southern regions of Ukraine. Then I would like to give the floor to Mr. Rudak. Thank you, Mr. Oleksandr. Mr. Roman, let's proceed to the fire safety. It's midsummer. The fires erupt in the forests, in the fields. Unfortunately, it's traditional for our country. We see the announcements about the critical level of fire threat. What does it mean, and what should the people do as they hear this announcement? Good morning, everybody. Yes, within the next couple of days, the highest level of fire safety is forecasted in Ukraine. This fire safety level means long-term high temperature in the country without any precipitations. It creates a significant threat of ignition of dry grass as a result of intentional ignition or by some technical devices like the cars that may be out of order moving along the fields in the forests with their exhaust systems out of order. So I would like to give you some statistics. In the ecosystems of Ukraine, within this year, 7,500 fires erupted, resulting in death of 6 people and 11 more injured. The most fires erupted in Kyiv, Lviv, Kharkiv and Poltava regions. Also, I would like to draw your attention to the fact that for the purposes of prevention of fires in ecosystems, the citizens should abide by the elementary rules. Now that the fire safety level is growing, it's prohibited to visit forests to make fires there. They should not drive in the forest using the vehicles which are out of order. People are prohibited to leave any household things there, like rags impregnated with different POLs. Only those vehicles are allowed to enter that service those territories. I mean the forestry vehicles. I also want to remind the citizens that according to the administrative code, there are penalties for violation of the safety rules and burning of dry vegetation. For example, Article 77 of the code contemplates that violation of fire safety in the forest is being penalized with amount of 1,500 to 4,500 hryvnias. According to the Article 77.1, the intentional burning of dried vegetation is penalized in the amount of 3,000 to 6,000 hryvnias. Thus, I would like to mention that the servicemen of the State Emergency Service of Ukraine implement preventive measures to ensure the fire safety, just like raids on the areas using the unmanned aerial vehicles to detect the violators. For example, such raids resulted in identification of Lviv region by one team of five violators who were brought to liability. Also, during this summer season, the most pressing topic is harvesting campaign, preservation of harvest, and prevention of fires in the fields. I want to stress for the businesses who own those fields that they should ensure compliance with all the safety rules, and the simple measures are the placards about the prohibition of burning the dry vegetation. After the crops are harvested, the remnants should not be burnt either, as they process their crops before their harvesting. There should be rows made in the ground in the distance of 4 meters from the field. Then the fields should be divided into sectors 50 hectares big, and they should be divided with the lines 8 meters wide. Also, the vehicles which are out of order are prohibited to be involved in harvesting. The fueling of the vehicles is prohibited in the adjacent areas and in the fields, both during nighttime and daytime. All the vehicles should be equipped with the fire extinguishers. The vehicles should also be not only in good order but also equipped with the grounding devices. So again, for the businesses, please comply with the standards and rules of the safety in the fields that you own. It's your responsibility. So in brief, this is it. Well, Mr. Roman, the work done by the State Emergency Service, does it demonstrate any results? Yes, definitely. Regardless the war in the country, and we have an extensive territory contaminated with explosive devices, we observe the temperature growth, and those are the factors that affect the fire safety in the country in general and in ecosystems specifically, I mean in the fields. So during the prevention measures taken by the State Emergency Service in Ukraine, both this year and last year, regardless the jeopardization of the situation, it remains under control, and we didn't have any large-scale fires last year, both in ecosystems and in the fields. So yes, you can see our work in the figures, in the statistics. Thank you very much. So let's proceed to the explosive devices. What is the situation with demining, Mr. Oleksandr? So what is the situation with the demining? What was the territory that was demined in Ukraine, and what are the vehicles and technical means used to expedite this process? I want to add a couple of words to what Mr. Roman said about the prevention. On top of the fire safety, we take the prevention measures on mine safety as well, and since the beginning of the full-scale invasion by the Russian Federation, we implemented more than 30,000 events on mine safety with children and with the adults. We work in coordination with international organizations. We work with UNICEF on launching some large-scale campaigns, and we expect that we will have the number of people affected by Russian mines and explosive devices decreasing. And according to the information from the Ministry of Reintegration, unfortunately 221 people died as a result of the explosion of explosive devices since the beginning of the full-scale invasion by Russian Federation, and more than 450 were injured. So the statistics are sad, and we do everything we can. We take all reasonable efforts to make those figures decrease. So please adhere to all the advice by State Emergency Service, specifically in the areas along the front lines, in the territories where there were intense fights. So the golden rule: if you see an explosive device, don't come closer, don't touch it, call 101. In no case, I'm talking about the occupied territories, in no case visit any water reservoirs, don't walk along the roads less traveled, so to say. Don't walk in the fields, don't walk in the forests. It's important to know that. It's important to abide by those rules. The parents should work with their kids. They should keep reminding them. We continue working with the Ministry of Education. We open the safety classes where the children are taught both online and offline. However, we still have cases. For example, in Kherson region, 2 children found an unknown device. They were playing with it and were heavily injured. I understand the agrarians, they need to work on their land. It's very important, but without clear understanding that the territory is clear of mines, they should get that information from the local authorities. They should not go in the field so easily. They cannot do that. It implies lethal threats. So talking about demining, since the beginning of the invasion by Russian Federation, we had 63 missions fulfilled by the pyrotechnic units of State Emergency Service. We defused more than 413,000 explosive devices, including 3,149 aviation bombs. Just imagine this situation. Just imagine how much of this dangerous metal was brought by the enemy. It will take us years and years to demine. We inspected 91,400 hectares of Ukrainian land. The main regions where the most of the pyrotechnic units work are the Donetsk region, Mykolaiv region, Kharkiv region, and Kherson region. Those are the areas. Well, obviously those regions include Sumy and Kiev region, but now I'm talking about the mostly contaminated areas, the regions where our people work. So what helps us? What is the material helping us? Obviously, we put a lot of emphasis on mechanized demining. In the State Emergency Service, we have 13 such vehicles now. All of them are involved in clearing operations, and mostly we try to demine the critical infrastructure facilities. I mean the aerial power lines, the gas pipes, the water pipes. We understand the level of damage and destruction is substantial, but people should feel comfortable with water and power supplies, so we put the most emphasis on clearing of the projects of on the critical infrastructure facilities, and one of the priorities is clearing the fields. We saw the harvest. There will be a harvesting campaign shortly. There is the mechanism developed, the metric system, how we engage the units, because not only State Emergency Service units are involved in those operations, but also the armed forces, the National Guard, National Police, State Transportation Service. So we take all necessary efforts to have our fields cleared of mines, and local authorities have the headquarters deployed, identifying the priorities of which field should be demined earlier or sooner. But people should not expect for some prompt results. Demining process takes time, and I'm talking about those demining vehicles. Compared to the last year, we had only one such vehicle, or in the beginning we had none of them, and now we have 13 of them, and their number will be growing. By the end of the year, we plan, I hope, we will have maybe 20, maybe even more such vehicles. So we continue our fruitful cooperation with our international partners, including international organizations and Ukrainian organizations, and we hope we have a plan of supply of those vehicles to our units. We have robotics system, we have robots for demining, So those demining vehicles, they mostly work in Kharkiv and Kherson regions. Those are the areas most contaminated with mines in Ukraine now. And as soon as we deoccupy Zaporizhzhia region, as we oust the enemy from there, from Donetsk, Kherson and Luhansk regions, there will be yet more work to do, given the dense mining of those territories by the enemy. But I hope that by then we will have enough vehicles to clear those territories. This is the brief data on the demining. Well, at yesterday's Ramstein, there was a signal yesterday that we would get more material for demining. Will it be used by the state emergency service for those demining purposes as now, or will the number of vehicles be taking part in the counteroffensive? Well, I don't know if it will be properly distributed by the government, but for the time being, this is the answer that I can give you. Well, you've mentioned that there are 13 vehicles now. You expect to get 20 or more by the end of this year, but what is the overall need? Well, we hope to get 100 such vehicles, because the basic problems that we need to cover, we could cover them with the 100 of such vehicles, and it will be of great help to our civilian sector. I'm not talking about the military now, I'm talking about the civilian sector, the reconstruction of our country. Because imagine there is an aerial power line, is damaged, there's a lot of such lines damaged, so to go and to stretch the cables there, the people should come there. I mean, the utility services, detect Ukrinform, they should come there to do their job. But to do that, those areas should be demined. Those areas would be demined by the engineers of State Emergency Service of Ukraine. For example, a person is standing on a distance. They don't stay in the vehicle. They are outside in a distance of 1 kilometer, which provides proper safety. So the vehicle goes certain distance, it goes pretty quick. A person with a metal detector, they would walk longer, so that vehicle grinds the soil to a certain depth, and thus diffuses both anti-infantry and anti-tank mines depending on the type of vehicle. It helps a lot, it preserves the safety for our people, and when we cannot identify the type of the explosive devices, you know, Russians, they sometimes make it as a mine threat. They have their strategy for the maximum damage for our pyrotechnics. They put, for example, anti-infantry mine under the anti-tank mine. So the robotic vehicles, they allowed to ensure safety for our personnel. We need to increase the number of armored vehicles for transportation of personnel, and specifically for transportation of the explosive devices that we are going to detonate in a controlled manner. You know, there was a last case in Kherson region that resulted in death of our 6 pyrotechnics. They had no weapon, but they were shelled. They were shelled in a barbarian manner. You know, our pyrotechnics, our rescuers are all protected by Geneva Convention, but Russians don't give a damn about it. But we keep working on rebuilding Ukraine together to the victory. Thank you very much, Mr. Oleksandr, Mr. Roman. Thank you for informing us on fire and mine safety. And at 12:30 we will have a press conference about the anti-corruption policy implementation in the defense sector. So stay tuned.